This is The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Roadmap, exclusively here on ASBN.com. I'm Lee Heisman, and every week we bring you some of the brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business owners who are climbing the ladder, scaling their businesses, and thinking about how one day to exit stage left. Well, today I have a special guest. Not only has he exited stage left multiple times, he is also the co-founder and CEO of CarynHealth, Mike Dendy. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lee. Happy to be here.
Mike, I'm excited for today because you're going to provide such valuable information to start with about your current operation, what your current endeavor is, but I'm so excited to hear your perspective on the M&A process. So Before we get to that, let's talk about CarynHealth. I mean, you have such experience in the healthcare space. Mm-hmm. Talk about what CarynHealth does and what makes it unique and why you got involved in the healthcare space.
Great. Well, healthcare space goes back 35 years. CarynHealth was started about 5 years ago. And I got an interesting phone call. I have a friend in New York that I've done a lot of business with in the past. And he said, Mike, do you know Bernie Marcus, Fran Tarkenton, and Dr. Tom Price? I said, everybody in Atlanta knows who those three people are, and anybody in healthcare knows who those three people are. So why are you asking? He goes, well, they're interested in starting a healthcare company, and they came to him for the financing. He goes, I'd be glad to help you guys get financing. He goes, but none of you guys know anything about healthcare. So if you will talk to my buddy, and it happened to be me, he goes, I'd like for him to kind of hear what you're doing, and if he agrees, then I'll help you finance the program. So met with them. Of course, they're all spectacular individuals, and said, okay, let's do it. So that's how CarynHealth was started. We initially called it Association Health Plans of America. And it's because when Tom came back from being President Trump's first HHS secretary, he says the people that are forgotten in healthcare are the small businesses and the individuals, the gig economy. He goes, can we build something for the gig economy? So that's what we did.
And it's really unique. You and I have talked about it, but talk about that unique sliver of how it works, because it's different than a regular healthcare system.
Well, we started off being oriented towards product. So could we create products for those people? So what I did this time, this is my fourth startup. So what I did this time is I said, I'm not going to go get traditional healthcare people. I want people from outside the industry. I want technology-oriented people who can actually help build something unique, because everybody in the old part of the industry thinks the same way. So I hired a bunch of old IBM guys. So the first thing they did when they said, hey, we can't run a company off this crappy old software that healthcare tends to work with. Healthcare industry is 25 years behind all the other industries technically. So they said, can we build our own software? So we actually put the company on hold for about a year while they started building the software we needed to support the programs that we wanted to create.
So, is it very different, just high level, because you've had a number of exits, and I want to jump into that. Starting this business, co-founding it, when you were able to have those exits, does it kind of take the pressure off where you can say, let's hold up for a year, let's develop it, versus most entrepreneurs are, building the plane as they're flying in it. In this scenario, it seems like you had a different timing structure.
Well, and think about who I'm partners with. They all said, hey, we're not in a hurry. We want to do it right. We don't ever want to be embarrassed. That's the first thing they all pointed me right at me, like, do not embarrass us.
They actually pointed at you.
Pointed, do not embarrass us. Okay, I got you. And you'd understand, it's a long story, you'd understand why.
But Mike, my wife says it to me every time I'm there. So I understand.
I get that every time I go out too.
Yes.
But so no, we didn't have that pressure. And all of us had been in business for quite a while. We're all old. And so we didn't have that. We had the pressure to do it right as opposed to fast.
See, that's a lot of entrepreneurs, they're building the plane as they're flying in it. They're running in that direction. And you've had the fortune from your previous success to build it right before you do there and not embarrass anybody.
Well, right. And this was the first business I ever got involved in where I actually built it to sell. All the rest of the businesses, it was my passion, it was my child. It was just something that I really never had any real plans to sell it. At some point in time, I knew eventually I would, but I never came in day to day thinking, okay, I've got to do this because I'm going to sell the business in a year or 2 years or 3 years. But this one, because of the financing we brought in, it was their plan over a 5 to 7 year period. We'd build it and we'd sell it. So I started this ground zero pretty much with the intent on having an exit.
So, it's really nice, and people talk about that. People talk about business plans and how important they are.
Right.
Most entrepreneurs don't do one. We're just flying by the seat of our pants.
Right.
But it sounds like your business plan was so structured in advance along the way and to the possible exit or planned exit.
It was, and
That's
it is.
spectacular.
Yes. Right.
So let's shift gears real quick and talk about those first few endeavors, entrepreneurial endeavors, and talk about your first exit and kind of how it happened. Give us a little process for people out there that have never done an exit. And then the shocking things that we were talking about before, how you see private equity and entrepreneurs.
Sure. Well, I was taken advantage of a bit on my first exit, as you might
Weren't
expect.
we all?
Yeah, as you might
Weren't
expect.
we all?
Yeah, as you might expect. It was a good learning experience. It worked out well. But I had a third-party administrator. Blue Cross, United, Aetna, and Cigna, they're all third-party administrators. So I had a really small one of those. And I never thought anybody would ever really want to buy one. I actually bought the third-party administrator. It was a tiny company when I bought it to support the business that I already had. The employers that I was already working with needed a quality third-party administrator, and I couldn't rent one. So I said, well, let's buy one. Start it myself, do it myself. So that's what we did. And it kept building. And then I started getting phone calls, are you interested in selling? Are you interested in selling? And I mean, it became a burden. I got so many phone calls. I thought, well, maybe this isn't a bad idea. So I had a couple of secondary partners that said, what would you think about doing this? They said, well, if we can get enough money for it, that'd be okay. So it was actually 5 different PE groups that came together. It was led by an Indian firm. I mean, JP Morgan was a part of it. So there were some big names involved. Of course, that caught my attention. And they came in and just sort of swept me off my feet. And I had a business broker helping me. And he told me right up front, never let them corner you in a meeting where you're making decisions if I'm not there. And
Great words of advice.
It was great advice. And I let it happen anyway. Again, these guys were really, it was a courtship. And they were courting me. And they were telling me everything I wanted to hear. And of course, always complimenting, you're the best one that's ever done this. Yeah, right. So, but they won the day over. Now, they only beat me by a little bit. And
Sure.
so as I look back now, it's like, okay, I could have positioned myself a little bit differently and probably gotten a little more money. But at the end of the day, I learned a lot. We all made a lot of money out of it, and it worked out fine.
So talk a little bit about an entrepreneur and private equity, kind of that relationship. When you're getting courted, you're the best, which makes sense.
Right.
And I'm not saying you're not the best after the deal, but talk about that. I always talk about it like a square peg into a round hole sometimes.
It is. It's very difficult. And I've learned and I've coached other entrepreneurs like myself who ask me about this. Don't expect to stay around very long, because private equity love entrepreneurs. Because most people in private equity, they're really smart. They've got great backgrounds. They've got Harvard MBAs, Yale MBAs, Princeton, whatever.
And they think they're really smart.
And they do.
They're smart and they think it.
And they do. And they think they're smarter than you. And so when they come in, you're the genius because you started something from zero, which none of them typically have ever done. You've built something and you've made it work. And now it's up to a point where they want it, right? So they want what you've got. They forget at that point in time that there's probably some unique idiosyncrasies that you have, personality-wise or just whatever, that made the business what it is. All they see is a renegade. Most entrepreneurs are renegades. I'm a renegade. I don't think like everybody else. I always have a board. I listen to the board and then I make my own decisions. That's what a CEO does, right? And they hate that. They want to drive that decision. So I would get sideways with them. And my first 2 exits, they kept me around for 6 months, and then 12 months, it's like, we don't need you anymore. Exit stage right.
Yeah.
And so fortunately, every time that happened, I already had another idea in my head for the next company, and I just jumped from one to the next one. And what's interesting is I left enough money on the table during each of the exits that they were out there working to make me money while I was starting a new company to make myself money on another level.
When you say, and you and I understand it, but for viewers out there, when you say, I left some money on the table, there's multiple ways to fill air in a balloon with the enterprise value.
Right.
If you were selling a business for $1, for example,
Right.
You didn't take the full $1.
Correct.
Could you describe what that means by you left money on the table?
Sure. So generally, private equity, especially if you're fairly small, if you're selling Gulf Oil or something, it's different. But if you're selling a fairly small company, they want you to have enough skin in the game so that you stay involved for a while. So generally, there's a requirement that you keep 10, 15, 20% in as part of the deal. And then they'll give you the option, do you want to leave a third in? Do you want to leave a fourth in? Do you want to leave half in or whatever? And you just have to make that call. And each of the times I've done it thinking that I was going to continue to be running the company. And then I was surprised the first time, a little bit surprised the second time. I'll never be surprised again. But they generally require that you leave some money in. So you get part cash and part stock. Yep. So you get stock in the new entity, then you get cash to walk away with. And it's worked out good for me every time so far.
And for our viewers out there, just for your knowledge, when someone's paying a multiple for your business, whether it be a 5X, a 10X, whatever the number is, they've done a thesis, these organizations, these PE firms, they've done a thesis that they've already planned to reflip this, hopefully in the future, for 20X. So don't think that they're considered or courteous. It's a win-win for everybody. They're aggregating organizations. They already have a plan to flip it for a 20X. So that stock that you have, Mike, sometimes that's a bigger second bite of the apple than the first one. Sometimes.
It's happened to me twice. So both times that I've sold, the first two big companies I sold, decent sized companies I sold, I made more money the second time than I did the first time.
You mean the second time that they sold?
The second bite at the apple. Right.
Yes. And how much stock did you leave in for each one? I don't even know dollar amount, but percentage.
25 or 30%.
Okay, so what's the smallest amount that you've left in and rolled?
25%.
And the largest amount?
Is 30%.
Okay, so that's your sweet spot. You liked it. Was that a requirement or was that your decision?
Yeah, part of it was a requirement. Generally, I think 15% was kind of what they wanted. And then as I looked at it and I said, well, I think we're still on a good growth path. What the private equity guys are really good at is financial engineering. So they know if I was fortunate to get 8 or 9 times cash flow, EBITDA, I know they know how to get 10, 11, 12. One, they've just got a bigger market than I have. And they know who to go to. They know how to financially engineer to get to that point. Now, you don't always like the way they financially engineer because sometimes it's just cutting expenses that you don't really need to cut. But they know how to get a company ready to sell. I was still going full speed when they came along and said, okay, we want to buy you. So I didn't have that year or 6 months to start saying, okay, I'm going to drive my EBITDA up so that I can maximize what I get out of the sale. They know how to do that, and they're really talented at that. So I kind of bet on that now, knowing that they're going to do a better job at financial engineering than I am, because that's what they do.
100%.
And I'm a business builder.
Well, I'll tell you the best part about working with private equity is that, similar to yourself, I've had fortune of selling businesses to private equity, and now I have a vantage point as being that broker in between everybody. Yeah. And I will tell you that you're exactly right. They're masters at getting the EBITDA larger. Entrepreneurs are not masters at getting the EBITDA because they're doing things. I never minded taking 2 steps backwards to secure and protect the longevity of my business. Sometimes the foresight of a PE firm is really for their next exit, not for this is my business forever. So let me pay my staff more money. Let me take care of my team, do things that may not be as profitable, but it provides longevity for the business.
And if you're an entrepreneur and your business is your child, as most people's are, you have to know what they want, or you need to know what they want and what their goals are as you're selling to them, because their goals and your goals are generally going to be different. I always considered every company I ever had as Mike Dendy Incorporated, no matter what we call the company. And whatever happened there was on me. Something good happened, it was on me. Something bad happened, it was on me. And they don't look at it that way. They look at it much more just generically. We're just here to build this thing. And they probably have 10 or 12 other deals going at the same time, the portfolio effect, as you know. And it's not their heart and soul. So you are actually selling one of your children, when you turn it over to somebody else. And you have to be prepared for that, because once they own it, you work for them.
That's exactly right. Well, it sounds like, Mike, and I know time flies when you're having fun, but it sounds like we're beating up private equity. And just before we started here, I want to compliment private equity that there's many ways to sell a business. There's sponsorship deals where they have to find financing or money. There's family offices where there's a smaller group. But private equity is the best way to do an exit in terms of the cash that's been allocated. So we've been kind of beating up entrepreneurship and PE, but to do an exit again, or as you go to do an exit in the future, would you avoid private equity or lean into them?
I would lean into it. Again, they're the ones with the money. They're the ones who've aggregated the money. They know how to get the money. And I'm not beating up private equity as much as I'm saying they have their goal and their mission. And you are better off short-term and long-term if you understand what their goals and missions are. Then you'll never be disappointed. And I've learned that. So the next exit that we have, I'll be prepared for that.
Amazing. Mike, first, 15 minutes flies by. So I could do this for an hour with you talking about the M&A space. For viewers out there, your knowledge, you're so humble. Every time I'm around you, you have so much knowledge. I'm always inspired by you. Not everybody has an opportunity to meet you. And maybe if they want to meet you and learn more about CarynHealth, or even if a firm's out there watching to talk about a possible buy in the future, how do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, they can just call CarynHealth. We're based here in Alpharetta. And they can reach me through the company, and I'm happy to talk with anybody at any time.
Wow, Mike, it's great to see you.
Good to see
you.
you.
My God, I just don't see you enough, and I'm glad that we're spending this time together.
Yeah, thank you, Lee.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Dendy, please do reach out to him. This man is a wealth of information. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope the show was as insightful for you as it was for me. It's always insightful when I'm with Mike. We hope to see you again next week on another episode of The Roadmap.
Thanks for watching The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.